Alex here with a legal nuts and bolts video. The topic is settlers versus litigators. Now, I don't really want this to be a video that reduces lawyers into like two different types. Like, I'm not trying to pigeonhole all lawyers into these two different types. And you can kind of see where I'm going with this now. But I did want to cover this very specific axis on how some lawyers practice, or the philosophy that some lawyers sort of go by when they represent people, because it is probably the biggest one that I find myself talking to people about when they come to me for help. A lot of people will come to me and say, I don't know how you got this far, because I hired a lawyer and they're telling me I can't do all of these things and I should take this deal in mediation and I should take this deal in settlement. One of the first things I tell them is, well, you probably hired a settler, a lawyer who settles. And I mean, I really don't mean for this to come off in a, I mean, because that kind of has a pejorative connotation. I don't mean for that to come off as a negative. I just think that, and it also could be very positive. And this is just from my personal subjective perspective. This is my opinion. I guess I'm just saying, take it with a grain of salt, that this is my experience in some of the problems that I've seen other people sort of stumble into when they hire an attorney that just won't fight for them. And of course, this is leaving out all of the issues of maybe it's just an unreasonable litigant and the lawyer has no choice but to have the client settle, and all of that. I'm not talking about any of that right now. I'm talking about the lawyers who will push you to settle a case because it's not worth it. Even if you're right, it's not worth it to go to an evidentiary hearing or a trial or go through discovery. Now, okay, I'm just going to go forward now. If people get mad, I'm sorry, but this is my perspective. There seems to be lawyers who take cases and they are out there willing to help people for $2, $3, $4, maybe $5,000. They've done this probably for years and years, and they probably take a mass volume of cases. They do not anticipate representing their clients for those small amounts of money all the way up to a trial. It's just impossibly, I'm going to say, it's just an impossible amount of work for such a small amount of money. Now, to a client, $2, $3, or $4, or $5,000 is a lot of money, but to them, it's not. When they take your case and they represent you, and they get you through sort of the early process where the complaint is being filed and they're waiting for the answer to the complaint or the petition, and maybe the first few motions get filed. These guys are probably anticipating getting you through your first mediation, maybe a case management conference, and at most a settlement conference. At that point, they're going to push you to settle, because maybe you don't have the money, maybe you do and they just don't think you do. This is just a style that they go, this is a style of practice. I mean, it sounds so bad, and I guess in a way it is, because if they would be more honest with you, maybe you wouldn't hire them. But at the same time, if they were more honest with you about it, maybe you just go to a different lawyer who would just lie to you, and then you hire them. So maybe, I mean, I don't know, it's so bad. Anyway, if you hire one of these lawyers, sometimes it's okay if you have an ex who's a normal person, a healthy person. But if you have a personality disordered ex, they'll figure it out. And I mean, even if they don't figure it out because they're smart, they'll just end up wandering into it just when they're just driving you insane and trying to drive up your costs. They're going to figure out, hey, anytime I push the envelope, anytime I cross a boundary, my ex just settles, they cave, and maybe it's just their lawyer just doesn't want to fight me. And so a personality disordered abuser will notice that, and they will take it too far. And those lawyers typically aren't the ones that are knowledgeable about these details with, mental health, enmeshment, alienation, personality disorders. So if you come to them and complain, they're going to probably tell you some canned answer like, well, if you work hard with your ex, you'll be able to work through it. You have to give a little to get a little. Be the bigger man. That's a common one that they use. Take the high road. They throw all this stuff at you to just get you to just give in. until your money runs out and then they withdraw. Or they settle your case and then they withdraw. What they don't realize is none of that works with a personality disorder abuser. It may work with an average, regular old abuser who, after a year or two, they're going to get sick of it. They're going to want to, move on with their life. They hate you and they're vindictive. But like I said, they don't have mental health issues. They're going to grow and they're going to move on. The personality disordered abuser will drive you through hell. You cannot use a settler. This is where I'm kind of getting at with this video. You can't use a settler style of attorney to get you through this process. You're either going to have to hire a litigator, which is way more expensive, or you're going to have to represent yourself at some point. So if you hire a settler for the beginning and they sort of get you through the beginning phases, that's great. But just plan going into this. If you have an ex who has mental health issues, obsessive alienation, enmeshment type of crap is going on, you're not going to be able to get very far with that settler attorney. You're going to have to find a litigator or learn how to represent yourself. Most likely, and if you're not rich, you're going to be representing yourself, because I went to so many hearings. I would have easily spent between $250,000 and $500,000. So many hearings, so many filings. There is no way that I would have been able to get through my case without spending a house or two in legal fees. It's just not possible. If anybody here hasn't seen my docket, take a look at it, because it's on my About tab in my YouTube. Click on the About tab and look at my docket, and you'll see with your own eyes how insane it is. This is what will happen to you if you have a personality disordered abuser or some other obsessive, just they won't let go. 6 years, 7 years, 8 years, they won't stop until they've been utterly destroyed by the family court system. If you don't succeed at that, they're going to continue to bother you until your child is 18, and maybe even after that. So anyway, litigators, they're rare in child custody. They're just rare. Very few of them are out there, and they're usually hired by wealthy people. So in Nevada, in Reno, I noticed that a lot of times they seem to be hired by, people like executives at companies or big casino moguls, these types of people who had six figures at least, if not millions of dollars. Sometimes you can hire a litigator if you can pay like $7,500 up front for their retainer, but that is not going to be, they're going to tell you right up front, just so you know, this $7,000 is not enough. When this goes to discovery, I'm going to need another $25,000 from you. Expect them to say that. And then if you're going to trial, they may need a little bit more, because you may need experts. That's just how expensive it is. The lawyers who don't tell you that, they're most likely the settlers, and they don't want to scare you away, because as I said, you'll just find someone else. They may feel you're just going to find some other lawyer who won't tell you the truth, and they're going to get your money anyway. If you're talking to a lawyer and they're telling you, expect $7,500 to $10,000 up front, expect $25,000, maybe $50,000 on discovery and to go to trial. If they're telling you that up front, and they're telling you that with an open mind to it, because sometimes one of the settler attorneys will tell you that to sort of get you to just back off later on in the process. After you've already paid them your initial retainer and it looks like your case isn't going to settle, they'll start to tell you things. When you're going into mediation, oh, by the way, when you go into mediation, just keep in mind, if this goes to trial, I'm going to need $25,000. Oh, when you're going into or when you're in the middle of settlement and they're trying to get you to agree, and you're kind of, I don't know about that, I don't want to agree to that, they may throw that out there. That's not a litigator. That's a settler who's pretty much hoping that you're going to just back off once you hear the dollar amount and just give in. They're ready to close your case because they don't usually take them beyond that. The worst thing you can do is I'm going to just stop there. This video has to be said. As much as I hate to say this stuff, people need to know. So what I'm going to get into next is whether or how you can tell a settler apart from a litigator. So first of all, I gave you a little bit of it already. Obviously, litigators go to battle. They go into trials, they fight them, they win them. Sometimes they lose. That's obviously one of the biggest ways you can tell. So you can ask them up front. I mentioned that I already told you one example was they're going to be upfront with you and they're going to be open-minded about it. So they're going to say, you know what, I'm willing to go to battle for you. It is going to be a little expensive. They're not going to say, oh, by the way, when you're going into mediation, just keep in mind this is going to cost a lot of money. They're not going to say it with that attitude. They're going to say it straight up front before you pay them a cent. They're going to have you ready, and they're going to say it with an open mind. If you ask them, You know, how many battles do you, I mean, how many of these matters do you actually take to a trial or to an evidentiary hearing? They should give you an upfront number, you know. If they're kind of wishy-washy, that's not good. They should tell you, you know, I do 3 of those a year. Um, and maybe they'll even give you an example of a recent one. You know, you could ask them, you know, can you tell me how your most recent one went? How did it go? And see if they're honest about it. See if they tell you, you know, you're going to get a different response from a litigator than you are from a settler, because settlers, they either rarely go to an evidentiary or they never go. Or they go to these like really tiny, small potatoes evidentiaries that are like, where's the child going to go to school? Like a post-judgment evidentiary on a single issue. They're not doing like those really hard, like who gets physical custody, who gets legal custody. They're not doing the big fights. They might do some of those smaller ones. That's the other way. I mean, you know, ask them what kind of case, you know, their most recent case, their best case, you know, their worst one. Ask them. They'll probably be honest with you if they're comfortable with litigating. The third, I think I'm on third, fourth, I don't know. The next thing that you could check into, and this is probably something that you, I don't know if it's a unicorn in your state, but in Nevada, this is going to be the unicorn litigator, is a litigator who also files appeals. The reason I say that is because my understanding from what I've looked at in Nevada is most appellate attorneys, they specialize in appeals, which means it's a lawyer who just does appeals, and most litigators don't do, they just litigate, they don't do appeals, and so they'll refer you to an appellate attorney if you want to appeal, or maybe they'll represent you, but then they'll consult with that appellate attorney and they'll bill you for the consult. So the reason I'm saying this is a unicorn is because if you can find an awesome lawyer that goes and litigates, you know, semi-frequently, and they do appeals, that really is one of the best things that you can do, that one of the best attorneys you can hire, because appeals can cost so much money, and a lot of that is because the appellate attorney doesn't know your case. They don't know what was filed. They don't know what was said at the hearings. So the appellate attorney is going to want to get more transcripts. They're going to want to read what's happened. They're going to have to watch all the videos. They're going to have to read your pleadings. You're going to end up paying a whole another attorney again for everything that the previous attorney did, plus more. That's one of the reasons why appellate attorneys cost so much. If you have a trial litigator that has, maybe it's a big giant company and they have an appellate office inside, no, that's going to still cost you a lot, because that other lawyer who takes the case is going to have to re-look at all your stuff. Never mind, because they're going to have to bill you again for everything that your trial attorney billed you for. I mean, it's not exactly double. I mean, they can sort of skim and, you know, watch important parts of the video. They can consult with your trial attorney, but it's a big chunk of what you pay for when you hire an appellate attorney. That doesn't apply if the trial litigator that you hired also represents you on appeal. If you can find that, that is, pay for that, because that person will be willing to file your appeal for way less money, because they'll know the transcripts they need. They don't have to reread all the pleadings. They remember what was in them. I mean, they may have to really, you know, refresh themselves, but it's not going to be the same as a whole, as I said, as a second attorney coming in and reading all those pleadings. They will know what was said at the hearings because they were there. So you will have to pay a chunk of change for that appeal, but it won't be as much as it would have been. Again, I stress, people who cannot afford paying for litigators or appellate attorneys, seriously look into representing yourself on appeal, because I've won 3 appeals representing myself against attorneys. I was published by the Supreme Court on a writ petition that I filed. So again, representing myself against attorneys. So it's not the best thing in the world, but if you don't have any money, sometimes you have to do what you have to do for your kids. And if it's not a child custody issue, of course it's not, the seriousness is not there, but you may still want to do it depending on whatever issue it is you're suing on. I wanted to end this video with one last little note. The people that hired, or what was I going to say? The best settlers, ironically, are the litigators. The litigating attorneys, the ones that go to court and fight, tend to be the best, the ones that get you the best settlements, because they are used to going to court and fighting. They're not afraid to do it. And so typically when you get one of your one of those attorneys when they have a deal for you, typically it's a better deal because they're not worried about the money, they're not worried about how they're going to go through the amount of work that it is. They're used to that. They do it all the time, so it doesn't intimidate them. So oftentimes, ironically, you're going to get a better settlement if you do take one with that litigator attorney. So I mean, take what you will from that. If you have any questions, comments, post it in the comments below. I do want to hear, I mean, the sad stories suck, but it helps my viewers to see the dangers of hiring a settler in a child custody case when you're up against a high conflict child custody ex, personality disordered ex. People need to know the danger before they just go and hire one of those attorneys. Again, please, I said this in the beginning of the video, I'm not just going to, this is not pigeonholing lawyers into just these two boxes. Lawyers are much more complicated than just these two categories. What I wanted to do is analyze this specific axis of comparison, just because I constantly have to tell people about this. It's one of the things that I get in my inbox and when I talk to people, whether it's in YouTube or on my other sites. And so I'm finally going to do a video on it, no matter how bad it says, no matter how bad this video sounds. I have to, I mean, I just have to tell people the truth about it because a lot of people are getting burned and upset. And I think that the dishonesty is part of what makes people so angry at the judiciary, at the legal system, at the lawyers. I would say probably a lion's share of the people that end up getting, for lack of a better word, screwed in child custody cases ends up being either the person who was tricked early on, so they didn't hire a lawyer at all, they were just tricked into just taking some kind of dumb deal, or the person that does hire a lawyer, but it's a settler, and that's almost worse because you're paying all this money, and you know, the next thing you know, they just want you to just close the case as quick as possible. It's almost worse than the other person who was tricked because at least they still have their money. They didn't go into debt. So anyway, I mean, as painful as your stories may be, go ahead and post it in the comments below. It'll help people. It'll make them see, you know, just how bad it can be and how careful you should be about looking into the type of attorney that you're going to hire for your case. So with that, I'll go ahead and end this video.